Good evening. Welcome to our midweek Bible service here at Azalea City Church of Christ. Thank you all for braving the rain. It's been a beautiful day outside, I would say. I've been soaked twice. I don't know about y'all, but hope everyone is doing well tonight. Certainly if you are tuning in online or at home, however, certainly want to welcome you as well. I want to ask that you continue to keep Brother Darren Eichner in your prayers. He's still in Spring Hill Memorial Hospital. He's received some good news today, good report, hopes to go home tomorrow. So please keep Brother Darren in your prayers. I know him and Sister Margaret are very excited about that. Want to certainly pray that everything goes well, maybe in the next 20 to 24 hours so that he can go home tomorrow. I want to ask that you keep in prayer Ron and Julie Kincaid. I don't know if that was today, but they were yesterday they were in a motorcycle accident. They were both okay. Stove up, as Terry said, planned to be here Sunday, but just knew they would not be here tonight. Ron had called and specifically requested prayer, so please keep them in your prayers if you don't mind. Just pray that there's no major injuries sustained from that. I want to ask that you continue to keep the Davis family in your prayers. It's the family that recently lost their 6-year-old daughter in a car accident. They had the funeral this past Saturday. I failed to mention on Sunday, the elders had deemed necessary to give them some money to help, not with the funeral. I think the funeral was covered, but just with some other medical expenses, whatever they may need throughout the next few weeks and months. They also said that it was okay to announce to you guys if you would like to help out any further. I know some of you have asked me, some of you have already donated money. If you would like to help with that, that's certainly okay with you, and we'll get some money to them if you would personally or individually like to help that family. Again, they're going to go through a lot of grief over the next few months and even years, but please keep them in your prayers as the father, Cecil, and Braylon's brother, Micah, who was 10, recover from their injuries sustained from that car wreck. Men's softball is scheduled for Friday night, 7 p.m. on Field B. Libby Phillips, who is here tonight. It's good to see you, Sister Libby. Libby Phillips is in need of some transportation to and from services on Sunday morning. So if you can help with that, please let her know, but also let the office know. Maybe we can all get in a rotation to help Sister Libby get here to services. The elders are going to dissolve the library, which is in the elders' office. Many of you have donated books over the years, or maybe some of your family has donated books to that library over the years. They want to give you the opportunity, if you would like to get those books back or have those books for yourself or do something else with those books, you're more than welcome to come get them. We're not throwing them away. They're not throwing them away. They were going to donate them elsewhere so that we can use that space in the office back there. So if you would like or desire to get those books, if you have or have had family members donate books in the past, you are certainly more... Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Or if anyone would like any books. So over the next probably week and a half, if you desire to look in there to see if there's a book that you may like for your own personal growth or own personal study, you can see one of the elders or Miss Glenda or Robin or myself, and we can try to help you out with that. This coming Sunday at Regency, we have our youth area-wide we have every month. So teens, I'll send a message out to you and your parents tonight about that. More information about that. Just wanted to make you aware that Sunday night will be our area-wide devotional at Regency. I believe that's all the announcements that I have tonight. Our song leader is Jason Smith, and our closing prayer will be by Mark Aldred.
Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky, but my one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you'd reign in me again, Lord, reign.
great to see you all this evening. Hope everybody's had a great week so far and a great day today. You're going to have a great night because we're going to open up God's Word and study it together, whether we are babies all the way up to us grown-ups. And so tonight, if you will, in our devotional period, open to John chapter 4, please. John chapter 4 is a great chapter, one of those great chapters of the Bible that talks a lot about some important things that happen in history. One of those, of course, or the main point there, is the woman at the well that Jesus encounters. I don't have time tonight to really break this down into a full study like it deserves, but I do want to go through this and kind of introduce where we're going on Sunday. In John 4, of course, in the very first part of this, the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John. Though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples. He left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. Now, there are a lot of reasons why, but it really is applicable to us. I want you to think about that. There are a lot of reasons he needed to go to Samaria. One of those is to encounter the Samaritan woman. But if you understand the message that he gives, if you understand the message that he gives to this woman, it is very applicable to us here, 2021, and I'll get to that in a moment. So, he goes to the city in Samaria. He goes to Jacob's well. That's verse 6, 5 and 6. Verse 7, a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The woman, of course, asked some questions. "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? Jews and Samaritans have no dealings together." Jesus answered her, verse 10, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." That living water is what we're all after. That's what we all should be thirsting for. Of course, the woman here in verse 11 responds to that by saying, "You have nothing to draw water with. This well's deep. Where then are you going to get this living water?" Verse 13, Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." Of course, they go through this where Jesus is about to start revealing his miraculous powers to her. For instance, it says, "Go tell your husband." She said, "I don't have a husband." Of course, he says, "You're right. You don't have one. You don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands. The one whom you now have is not your husband, is that you spoke truly." Now, this is where I really want to pick up. We'll go verse by verse here till we get to our points tonight. Verse 19. The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain," very important. "And you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship." I need you to see this now. Jesus goes, he said, "I've got to go to Samaria. I've got to go through Samaria." He goes there to encounter this woman, but he also goes to the place where the Samaritans would gather to worship. She says, "You're a Jew." She recognizes they're different, right? She says, "You Jews say that the true place to worship, though, is in Jerusalem." So what did that do? That brought conflict. Already, there's conflict there. She's already acknowledged, hey, we're Jews and Samaritans. We're different people. She's also perceiving that there's something different about this man because he knows her whole life history. But there, she makes the statement, and this is so critical to where we're going Sunday with all of this. She says, "We worship here. You Jews say you got to worship in Jerusalem." In other words, what are we supposed to do? Don't you love Jesus' answer? 21. "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know that what we worship for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth. Because of that statement, because of that proclamation, here we are, 2021, not in a temple, not gathering at a holy place per se, a holy city to worship, not gathered to where we as Gentiles have dictated that this is our place of worship. Of course, we're in a nice building, and I get that. But because Jesus made it so easy and practical to worship wherever we are, He made it so practical and so easy to worship wherever we are, and it's still so sad that so many choose not to worship. It's still so sad, isn't it, that so many people decided tonight even to not be here. I know there may be rain and there may be those tuned in, but there are those who made a decision that said, it just doesn't matter that much. It mattered so much to Jesus that He changed the course of where He was going to get to Samaria, to talk to this woman, and got John to record it, to say, hey, it doesn't matter where, but it matters that you do. And you see, we've got to get that through our minds. Worship of the Father is critical. The woman said to Him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When He comes, He will tell us all things. You want to talk about a mic drop moment? Jesus said to her, I am He, I who speak to you am He. You see, I don't have authority on what to change about worship. Are there some approaches that we change? There's some methods maybe we change? Absolutely. But Jesus Christ changed it all. He changed the attention off of going through ritualistic worship. He made it personal. He made it vital to understand that wherever we are, whatever nationality we are to worship. Spirit and in truth. Worship God. Not to be entertained. Not to just, man, I feel good all the time. But to bring ourselves, prostrate ourselves before Him, and worship Him. We get it, right? We're here. But we've got to make it contagious. We've got to elevate our thoughts on worship. We've got to elevate our approach to worship. We've got to elevate the one who we worship. Tonight, if you're on a mountain somewhere, or you've wandered to some foreign city, and your desire tonight is to come home to the one that we ought to worship, I want to encourage you to make a decision tonight. You're in and come to His Word. I love being able to worship. I love being able to worship in spirit and in truth. I love being able to worship according to God's Word. I love being able to worship with God's people. I want to make that same desire in me in so many others. Maybe tonight you're here and you haven't had that desire. Maybe tonight you're here and something has been sung or something has been said, something has been prayed that helps you want to come home. Tonight, if you're not yet a child of the King, or tonight, if you need to respond publicly, I encourage you to do it right now together. We'll stand. All right, church friends. We are in the Epistle Hebrews. We are in the end of chapter 6 for the third week in a row. I do have to get to chapter 7. Terry is ready for me to get to chapter 7, aren't you? That's Melchizedek. You said you were ready. But no, chapter 7 is one of those interesting chapters. I love talking about things that people, have perceived as mysterious or whatever. I love trying to get to the bottom of those kinds of things, and we'll be ready to talk about that for whatever reason. The computer's not acting fine. But I'll get it going. But Hebrews chapter 6, we really left off talking about the apostasy, so to speak, in these verses, and really the danger of being immature as Christians. And I do not think we need to rehash that. I think we've rehashed it pretty well. We definitely know there is an opportunity for the devil to creep in and make us major in the minors, if you will, if we don't grow our faith. But what he does in verses 9 and following is shifts gears. So somebody read for us 9 through 12. Make a few comments and we'll move on to verses 13 and following. We'll get to chapter 7, I believe, tonight. 9 through 12, Hebrews 7.
I got it.
6.
I got it.
Thank you, Burge.
Even though we speak like this, dear friends, we are convinced of better things in your case, the things that have to do with salvation. God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. We want each of you to show the same diligence to the very end, so that what you hope for may be fully realized. We do not want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised.
What leaps out there in verses 9 through 12 to you? Sir? Need to grow. Absolutely. That's a continuation of what he's said in verses 1 through 8 and really the end of chapter 5 as well. But what I was going to say before I asked the question, but what I should have said before I asked the question is sometimes when I'm reading Scripture, I always ask myself, what really jumps out at me here? What's something I can say? And I agree, David, that jumps out at me there too. Anything else?
And not to be lazy.
Yeah, not to be lazy. I think that goes hand in hand with what David is saying there and what the Hebrew writer is certainly saying. Why is there a danger in being lazy as a Christian? I'm in Proverbs in my personal study, and the proverb writer, whether it's Solomon or whoever writing some of those proverbs, talks a lot about the sluggard, if you will, the lazy person. Obviously, we understand lazy people in society that if they're not going to work, they're not going to get paid, they're not going to eat, those kinds of things. But spiritually, there's a real danger, isn't it? What?
Lukewarm.
Yeah, we're lukewarm, and that makes it an abomination, really, to God.
Those two words don't go together, Christian and lazy.
Exactly right.
You cannot be a lazy Christian.
You're right. It's an oxymoron, right? It cancels each other out. I think that's what that means. That may be wrong, but like jumbo shrimp, so to speak. You cannot be a lazy Christian. You cannot. That doesn't go hand in hand. That's a very good point. Bill, you were going to say something? I know Jeff and David.
As he was reading that, I thought Larry Hancock.
Yeah. Y'all hear me talking? Okay. That was kind of weird. Yeah, one's just plenty good for me. Yes, Larry Hancock, he wasn't a sluggard. He wasn't lazy. He was a man who worked, a man who didn't feel like working, I'm sure physically, but he still worked. By the way, his wife is still working too. If we elders look like we're a little swollen when we come out of our elders meetings, it's because she always has snacks waiting on us, even now. No, if y'all wouldn't come in there, I'd eat all those sausage balls. But nonetheless, I mean, that's the type people. And I know that seems probably to her, it's just a little something. To us, it's servanthood, you know? It's love, that's right.
I think Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff?
Well, I was just going to say, kind of what the wife was saying along those lines. If we're lazy, that constitutes lack of productivity.
Absolutely.
Lack of productivity constitutes lack of fruit bearing, and we all know what Jesus did to the fig tree.
He cursed it, didn't he? And when they came back by, it was withered up and dead.
Gone.
And you know, then he also said later on, every tree that does not produce good fruit, it will be chopped down and burned in the fire. And that's right, Jeff. If we're not productive, that means we're lazy. If we're lazy, going back to what Mike said, we can't call ourselves Christians spiritually. Jesus Christ came to serve. He came as an action word, if you will. David?
I'm saying the same thing about yourself.
Sure.
But, you know, he says, we don't want you to become lazy. So I'm saying, why?
Mm-hmm.
He said, we'd rather you imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised.
Yes.
So why do you not become lazy? Because you will not inherit what's been promised.
Exactly. And don't you love that it's put so simply for us? I am not a complex person. Some may argue that. It's like my wife. But mentally, I do not think that I think with complexity. I can't even say it, much less think it. Copeland, stop laughing. But, so I need simple, right? I need simple, and God laid it out simply. If you are lazy, you're not going to inherit heaven. That's about as simple as it could be said.
But he also gives us, like, a path.
Yep.
Right? That's one thing about Scripture you're always going to get. You're not just going to get is, cursed is the man who does this.
Right.
But rather the opposite side. How do I please God as opposed to displease? And so the end of verse 12 gives us that answer, right?
Yep.
Instead of following the lazy path, find some spiritual heroes, right? Some people
That's right.
who have, the Larry Hancocks of the world,
Yeah.
who have done it and shown you how to do it. And the Bible says they're to imitate those people.
Yeah, and he's building to chapter 11. And that's where he's going with this. It's a great intuitive way to look at it, that he is leading up. He's about to give some examples, even here in verses 13. And will you read? You mind? He's going to start talking about Abraham and others, but Melchizedek in 7, and he's getting to chapter 11 that talks about all these great heroes to imitate. But George, if you will, read 13 through 20, please.
Okay. When God made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself, saying, surely blessing, I will bless you, and multiplying, I will multiply you. And so after he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise. For men indeed swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is for them an end of all dispute. Thus God, determined to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath, that by two immutable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we might have strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus having become the high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek.
There's a lot to unpack there. Here's the gist of it. Immutability. What does it mean? Two immutable things. Unchanging. Infallible, right. Say it again, Jack.
I said the NLT says unchangeable.
Unchangeable. So what does that mean? There's no Congress, there's no House, there's no anybody going to vote and change this. There's no corporation, there's no hierarchy, there's no anything that can change this. It's just like those 10 Commandments. He penned by his finger, or however he did it, on those stone tablets. These are not going to change. And what were those two things? It was an oath and a promise. What were they? All right, we know God can't lie. And the promise is who?
Refuge.
All right, refuge. What David said just a moment ago. That inheritance. And he illustrates this through Abraham. Again, they could relate to Abraham. They knew who Abraham was, remembering the context is keen here. Abraham, he made a promise to. Abraham didn't. Jason said Sunday in our class, sometimes like pain and suffering, we're talking about that because a lot of agnostic or atheist people will use pain and suffering to try to discredit and disprove God. But sometimes we look at things like this. He described those pictures. You remember how you could look at those pictures and you stare at them, and then you pull them away and you could see the picture? That was a little popular thing a bunch of years ago, probably now. But sometimes we see things right here, don't we? But God sees them way out here. He exists outside of our time, okay? And so we don't see those things. So he tells Abraham's right here. I'm 100 years old. You're going to be the father of what? Many nations. That was an oath. That was a promise. That was immutable, right? It was not going to change. So what happened? Abraham didn't believe it. He kind of laughed about it. Sarah laughed about it. They took matters in their own hand. God said, if I make an oath to you, if I make a promise, it's going to happen. And ultimately Isaac was born. Isaac then had what? He married Rebekah. Rebekah and Isaac had twin sons, Jacob and Esau. All that trickery happened. Jacob ultimately marries Rachel, but along the way he has to marry Leah. And then maidservants, you talk about a soap opera. Maidservants get involved, and all these children are born. He has a wrestling match with God, and his name is changed to Israel. Those 12 sons of Israel became the 12 tribes. Those 12 sons of Jacob became the 12 tribes of Israel. And through that, Jesus Christ comes from Judah. So guess what happened through Isaac? All nations were blessed. He had as many children, the Jewish people, as sand on the seashore. Now, as God's chosen people today, as Christians, it still continues. The point of it is, Abraham saw it right here, didn't he? But there was this huge oath and promise that he couldn't see. Sometimes as Christians, we see it right here. But what do we forget? The immutable things. And that's so important for us tonight to remember. And so what does that do? Bill, anchor is important. Tell us about some anchor story. Bill, you got an anchor story for us? Probably not. I know. Bill, for those who may not know, Bill used to do a lot of sailboating, and he does a lot of fishing. And I'm sure there have been some times when things may have got a little hairy along the way. Yeah. Sometimes it'd been nice probably just to throw out the anchor and wait it out. What does a good anchor do, Jeff?
Holds you in place no matter what the conditions.
Holds you in place no matter what the conditions. What is our anchor?
Jesus Christ crucified.
Jesus Christ crucified. It's that hope, David.
For a little extra, we'll just call it the lifeline, which Jesus said.
That's right.
If your anchor rope is 150 feet long and you're out where I was at a certain time and the waves are the way they are, your anchor does not hold. You got to have a lifeline long enough.
That's right. That's right. And He is both. That's right. He is our anchor. He is our lifeline. And that's a beautiful thought. Because sometimes, here's the point that goes with that. Nothing wrong with the anchor. Nothing wrong with the rope. It was the conditions around it that released that anchor. But because of that anchor you originally had, you had the lifeline. Sometimes we throw that anchor out and life happens. And we get flipped upside down. And we think, okay, the anchor's not holding, but there's the lifeline.
Sometimes it's not tied off, too.
If you don't tie it off, it did you no good, did it? That's right. I love this. It's an old hymn we sing or have sung, I guess, over the years. The hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, which enters the presence behind the veil. That anchor is the hope that we have in Jesus. Bill?
And see, there's where we have trouble sometimes with that hope.
Yeah.
We view hope as a weak word.
Right.
Oh, I hope.
I hope it happens.
This is not talking about
No,
that.
sir.
This is talking about great confidence.
Sink the anchor in it.
Yes, sir.
It's going to grab hold when we get into that promise. What are they? It's immutable. It's unchangeable. If He said, I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, that's a hope we can hold on to.
Yeah, I've used the analogy a bunch of times. It means I'm not flying standby.
That's right. And really, we're on autopilot because we trust the one who's captaining the ship. He's doing the work, and He's done the work. We have an anchor. Now, he closes this out with something else they're familiar with. What is it? High priest and the tabernacle curtain and the Holy of Holies, right? He says, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus, having become high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Dun, 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 dun. Now here's chapter 7. Any thoughts on chapter 6?
Just a quick one.
Yes, sir.
Back verse 15, Abraham received what was promised. After waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. We might only see
Yeah.
here, but we
Yeah, but he didn't. He didn't wait patiently at first. And that's why God told him, Ishmael's not the one. You need to be patient. Now, once he was patient, and Sarah is like, okay, it became Isaac. But even then, he told him to go sacrifice him. You know, and I mean, we got to have enough rope, we got to have enough anchor, we got to have enough lifeline. Jesus entered the temple. He tore down the veil. I think that's such a beautiful moment at the cross when the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. He tore down the wall of separation. Remember, if old Terry Cagle strolls into the Holy of Holies, he's going to die. Okay? The high priest is who could enter it. And it was Jesus who tore it down and became our high priest forever. In the order of Melchizedek. So let's get into this story here. Verses 1 through 3, chapter 7, please. Someone?
I've got it.
Thank you, John.
For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being translated king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days or end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually.
And enter the spooky music, right? Here's this mysterious king. Here's this mysterious priest. That Jesus is an antitype of, right? You following me? That's what he's doing. He's doing a comparison between Jesus and Melchizedek. Now, here's what we need to know. Melchizedek's not the first time he's been mentioned in the book of Hebrews, right? He's been mentioned several times already. But here in chapter 7, the author of Hebrews turns to a much fuller explanation of what must be, I guess, termed the boldest argument in the entire Bible based on the historical account of Melchizedek. Somebody turn back to Genesis 14, please. Genesis 14. I got to turn there myself. So give me just 1 second so I can tell you the verses. This is where we're going to first encounter Melchizedek. Pick up with me verse 8. The king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king... Boy, I didn't realize it was going to be all these hard words here, right? I didn't want to pick up there, actually. I was thinking king of Salem when I first saw it. Verse 18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Now the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons and take the goods, etc., etc. That is all we knew of Melchizedek until we get to Psalm 110, verse 4. Somebody turn and read that, please. Psalm 110. Psalm
110:4.
Yep.
The Lord has taken oath and will not break his vow. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek.
Yeah. So we had that in Genesis 14. We're introduced to Melchizedek, Abraham. Of course, he references that here. Why would he reference these things? Remember, context is key. They were the Jews. They knew. And what would be...
It's patriarchal age to the Mosaic age.
Yeah.
It's Genesis patriarch.
Correct. Then Mosaic.
Mosaic.
Right.
And then now, Christian. This is another supremacy of Christ.
Prophetic then Christian. But yes, sir, go ahead. Now, what were you saying?
I think it's just showing the supremacy of Christ again.
Oh, right. It showed the supremacy of Christ, and they understood Abraham, and they understood this. But what else would be piquing their interest? Melchizedek. It's just as interesting to you today if you haven't read this before. They had heard about this Melchizedek. Abraham gave, and he paid a tithe to him, and all these things. And then the Psalm 110, verse 4, the psalmist there writes a very quick point, of course, through the inspiration of God, writes a very quick point, and that's a prophecy about who? Jesus Christ. So we have Genesis 14, Psalm 110:4, and then all of the book of Hebrews that's mentioned it. The inspired author of the book of Hebrews reveals that the reference in Psalm 110 and verse 4 is not a minor thing at all. Could you imagine all those years they read the Psalms that was just a minor thing to them? But man, there's a lot unpacked in that Psalm 110 verse 4. And this is such a cool thing to see the Bible start revealing all this to me. In fact, on the contrary, it was something God swore to, which is a what? An oath. Okay, it's immutable. God Himself, in the reference of Psalm 110 verse 4, made mention of a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And therein lays the key to unravel the mystery that the Messiah, whose kingship descended through Judah, that's unique in itself. Remember now, he is laying out a plan. I told you when we started Hebrews, I believe it is the greatest, just the way he lays out everything. That's under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. So it's going to be perfect. It's just such a beautiful narrative that's being unfolded and unpacked. Okay, so you just got to think over the whole course of it all, where he's going with all this. And so he's unpacking now the Messiah, like Virgil said, going back to the patriarchal age, the Mosaic age, the prophetic age. Now in the Christian age, he's talking about the supremacy of Christ. Okay? He descended through Judah. His priesthood was an altogether different order from ones enjoyed by the Levites. In Hebrews chapter 7, we see that Melchizedek is said to be likened unto the Son of God. Which verse was that? I'm not back in Hebrews here.
Verse 3.
All right, verse 3. Let me go. All right. Hang on. My computer's running slow. I would turn to it here. I have to get my glasses out to see it. I can blow it up really big on this thing. All right, yeah, verse 3. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, etc., but made like the Son of God. Now, let's talk about that. What do we know about the Son of God?
We don't really know where he came from, other than from God.
All right.
Melchizedek's kind of the same way. They don't have a genealogy for him.
Johnny studied this before.
They don't know where he came from, really.
Yeah, I'm kind of building this up dramatically, aren't I, Johnny? It's really not that much of a dramatic thing at all. Really, all it's saying is what? But it seems so mysterious, right? He's just, I've heard people say, well, he must have just poof, there he was one day. Don't you think that we'd have learned a lot more about that in Genesis 14? Abraham goes and finds this man. I don't know, maybe not, because Enoch walked with God one day and one day he didn't, and it's just a very quick blurb through the Bible. Now he's going to reference it again here in this book, but the point of it is, he was a high priest. Okay? And there's no record of his genealogy. That doesn't?
Look beyond that. It says without beginning of days or end of life.
Yeah, and that's just saying there's no record of it all. It's not saying that he's just this mysterious created being. But where Johnny and everybody's going with that, it is a fair comparison. So let's talk about the comparisons. The word Melchizedek means king of righteousness. So the very name becomes a title for our Lord Jesus Christ. He's likened after the order of Melchizedek. High priest after the order of Melchizedek. He's king of righteousness. Number 2, king of Salem means king of peace. And thus the title of Melchizedek is another appropriate title of our Lord. Psalm 9, 6 and following, Psalm 72, 7, of course talking about Jesus and peace. Verse 3, Melchizedek was both king and priest, a double dignity not enjoyed by any other Hebrew, not even Moses. And here, Jesus Christ is both priest and king. 4, Melchizedek received tithes of Abraham. Christ receives gifts of love and of those who follow him. Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine, going back to the original in Genesis 14. Although not specifically mentioned here because it was not important to their argument, the fact itself is strong that Jesus also brought forth bread and wine at the Last Supper. Melchizedek blessed Abraham. Christ blesses his followers. Melchizedek's priesthood encompassed service to Gentiles and Jews alike. It's witnessed by the reception of Abraham, and Christ also is the high priest of all mankind, having no racial or other limitation. And then finally here, the eighth likeness between Melchizedek and Christ is a little more difficult to understand because it's not founded on anything that Melchizedek did or said. Not even upon anything that is said about him in the Genesis narrative. The eighth similarity being made to depend upon the manner and form of the Genesis record is with special reference of what is not said. The statement by the author, of course, in Hebrews is Melchizedek had no father, no mother, no genealogy, no beginning of life, and no end of days. But that simply means that he had none of those things in the scriptural record. Doesn't mean he didn't. He had a mom, he had a dad, he had those things, but it's not recorded in the scriptural manner. However, that is a comparison to Christ because he had no beginning and no end. He's always existed. Any questions so far? Sorry, I know that was a lot to unpack real quick. Y'all got it all figured out? I think the comparison was so critical because it was so unique to what they knew. It was so unique because they knew Aaron as high priest, the Levitical tribe as high priest. But what does Melchizedek date? He dates prior to the Levitical priesthood. Now, here's where he's going with this, okay? Eventually. Melchizedek was such a unique high priest because of the things we've already talked about. But it dates well before the Levitical priesthood. The Levitical priesthood came in, there was a change in the law, right? What became law? Well, yeah, don't think that far about it. What became the law with Moses? That's a softball. Come on now. The Ten Commandments. The Mosaic Law came into effect. When there is a change in law, there's a change in priesthood. So that changed the law, right? Or that the priesthood changed, the law changed. It became now the Levitical priesthood or what have you. When all the priests had to come from Levi. Jesus didn't come from Levi. He came from Judah. So guess what? We got to change the law again. And that's where he's going with this. When there is a change in the priesthood, there had to be a change in the law. There's going to be no more law change. Because now he's a priest in the order of Melchizedek. And the law is the law of Christ. I'm about out of time, and I think I know we got about 4 minutes, but any thoughts on that? By the way, according to that, I've got an hour and 24 minutes. I have to take my watch off now because I really get confused by it. But that's okay. We can always take it down, and I won't even worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I hear you. What else you got, Sister Nash? You got anything?
No.
I can't let y'all go early. We got to be bell to bell in here, right? That's what teachers.
Change the clock up there.
Change the clock.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Anybody confused on anything? Really? I don't want anybody to leave confused.
We're going to pick up here next week, right?
Yes, sir. You got a question for me?
Well, I just think it's interesting how he talks about when Abraham gave him the gift.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm definitely putting it up there.
The gift comes from the Levites.
Yes.
The Levites weren't even in existence.
100%. Isn't it amazing how God... I mean, you think about it. Where it really hit me today is Psalm 110:4. How many... Now, when I read Psalm 110:4, and I know what the whole narrative is, every time I hear that, it jumps out at me. But when they were reading Psalm 110:4, it was just another part of a song to them. But think of, right there in the middle of it all, God said, oh no, Jesus Christ is coming. When I try to think right here, boy, I don't have anything figured out. God has seen my life from the broadest of views. That's one reason, as I said Sunday, and somebody told me this week, they went and they deleted their Facebook account. And I appreciated that honesty. They said, because I need to remove the trash. But the more time we spend on Twitter, and the more time we spend on the news and the more time we spend on, we can only see things right here. And that's not who our God is. Trust me, I can get bogged down with the best of them in it. And I can get fighting mad over it. And I've got my views politically and I've got my views biblically and man, it can make me, but that's why I got to, if I'm going to open this temple up to good, I've got to get the trash out. Don't sleep on the Old Testament, y'all. I know we're not bound by it. But man, there's a lot of good stuff to unpack. There's the Hezekiahs of the world. There's the Melchizedek stories of the world. There's the Psalm 110:4s of the world. And God He's always been in control.
Here, I'm adding one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of failures in there as well.
100%.
But I'm looking God's people. And that's
No doubt.
not an encouragement, or should be an encouragement for us all, because when I fail, and I do horribly at times, I think back to God still loved
Yeah.
these people.
I can relate not to the great things David did, but how I want to be a man after God's own heart, but then so often I break his heart. That concept, Or even Peter, even in the New Testament, how I want to be that bold man and then I'm hiding, and it does encourage me that there's hope for me, there's hope for you. But it's not that hope that's a fear, a sissy word, let me say it that way.
It's a wish.
It's not that hope's a wish. This hope's an anchor. Now we're out of time. Sister Nash, see you next time.
Oh, okay.
You thought I was going to call you for a question.